The market square was loud that night. Bright alien lamps lit the stalls, but all the attention was on the wooden stage in the center. On that stage stood a young alien girl, her wrists bound with a silver chain that shimmered under the lights. The chain wasn't just to keep her from running, it was a sign to everyone that she was being sold. Her clothes were simple, almost too plain for such a public display. But her face, pale and tense, was more than enough to draw the crowd's attention. She kept her head lowered, eyes on the wooden floor beneath her bare feet. She didn't want to look up. She didn't want to see their faces, those hungry, judging eyes. Near the edge of the platform stood her family. They weren't crying, they weren't ashamed. They were dressed in their finest clothes, the kind they could never afford before. They stood tall as if proud of what was happening. Her father whispered to her mother, and they both smiled as the auctioneer prepared to start. This sale was their ticket into a higher social rank, a step into the world of important people. To them, she was not a daughter anymore. She was a payment. The crowd shifted, whispers mixing with laughter. Some bidders checked the coins in their hands. Others looked her up and down like she was a rare item in a shop. Then, from the shadows near the back of the crowd, a pair of human eyes watched. The man they belonged to was tall, broad-shouldered, and silent. He didn't shout like the others. He didn't jostle to get closer. He simply stood there, hands in his coat pockets, his face hidden under the brim of his hood. He looked at her not like a thing to be owned, but like someone who didn't belong here. The auctioneer raised his voice. Tonight we present a rare offer, young, healthy, with good lineage. Her family sacrifices her for the betterment of their bloodline. The words made her chest tighten. Sacrifices. No, they were selling her. She bit her lip, trying to stop the tears, but her throat burned. She had been told for days to keep silent, to obey, and to bring no shame to the family name. But standing here, chained for strangers to judge, she felt like shame itself was all they had given her. The bidding started. 500 credits. One alien shouted. 700. Another voice came from the left. The numbers kept climbing, and with each call, the air grew thicker. She stared at her toes, wishing she could vanish into the wooden floor. Every shout felt like a hammer, driving home the truth soon. She would belong to someone who didn't care about her at all. The human man's eyes narrowed. He could feel the wrongness of it. In all his travels across alien worlds, he had seen many ugly things, but this was different. This was the kind of cruelty that didn't even hide behind lies. The auctioneer smiled wide, his voice carrying over the crowd. A fine future servant? A perfect addition to your house? Who will take her home tonight? Her heart sank further. The shouts grew louder, coins clinked, and a few aliens laughed as if this was nothing more than a game. Her family watched, eagerly, not once looking at her face. That was when the human moved. He stepped forward, his boots hitting the stone floor with a sound that cut through the noise. Heads turned. The auctioneer looked annoyed at first until he noticed the human wasn't holding any coins. "You're here to bid, outsider?" the auctioneer called. The human's voice was calm, but it carried an edge that made the crowd go quiet. "I'm here to stop this." The silence that followed was heavy. A few aliens laughed nervously, thinking he was joking. "This is a lawful sale," the auctioneer said sharply. No outsider has the right to." "Lawful?" The human interrupted, his gaze sweeping over the crowd. "Since when is selling your own blood lawful?" The alien girl lifted her head just enough to look at him. It was the first time in weeks that she had met someone's eyes without fear. Something in his tone, steady, certain cut through the noise in her mind. Her father stepped forward, his voice dripping with contempt. "She is ours to give. It is for the honor of our family." The human's jaw tightened. "Honor," he said slowly, "is not built on chains." A murmur rippled through the crowd. Some agreed quietly. Others glared at the human with open hostility. The auctioneer slammed his hand on the wooden rail. "Enough, guards." 2 armored alien guards moved toward the human, their weapons ready, but he didn't step back. In fact, he stepped closer to the stage. His hands were still in his coat pockets, but his stance made it clear. If they touched him, there would be a fight. The girl's breath quickened. This wasn't part of the auction. This was dangerous. One guard snarled. You don't belong here, human. Walk away. He looked at the girl again. No, he said, his voice low but firm. Shh. Doesn't belong here. The tension snapped like a wire. The guards lunged. The human moved faster than anyone expected, dodging the first strike and knocking the second guard's weapon to the ground with a sharp kick. The crowd gasped, pulling back. The girl's heart pounded. She didn't know who he was or why he cared, but for the first time, she felt a flicker of something she hadn't dared feel in a long time: hope. The market square had fallen into uneasy silence after the human's sudden move. The two guards he had disarmed lay groaning on the ground, weapons scattered. No one in the crowd dared step forward, most simply stared, unsure if they were witnessing madness or something far more dangerous. The auctioneer's voice trembled as he tried to regain control. This is an official event. The law. The human cut him off again. The law can be twisted, but justice can't. This ends now. Psst. Gasps rippled through the crowd. No outsider had ever spoken like that here. The alien girl's family stood rigid, their faces frozen in shock and fury. Her father clenched his fists, stepping toward the human, but the man's cold gaze stopped him mid-step. Who are you to challenge our customs? The father spat. The human's voice was calm, but his words carried an unshakable weight. Someone who knows slavery when he sees it. The crowd reacted with a mix of anger and discomfort. Some shouted for him to leave, others whispered among themselves, eyes darting between the human and the chained girl. The girl herself stood still, hardly breathing. She didn't know this man, yet his presence made her feel safer. Two new guards approached, larger than the first pair, their armor gleaming under the lights. The auctioneer gestured at them wildly. Remove him. The human raised a hand not in surrender, but to stop them. Before you touch me, hear this. I invoke the law of claim. The words hit the crowd like a sudden wind. Murmurs grew into shouts. Guards hesitated. The girl blinked. She had heard of the law of claim, oft forgotten, ancient code buried deep in the city's traditions. Few remembered it, and fewer dared to use it. It was a trial of strength, skill, and courage, and if won, it granted the victor full protection. Rights over a chosen individual, regardless of any previous contract or sale. You mock us, the auctioneer sneered. That law is dead, and let's see if your people have the courage to bury it properly, the human replied, his eyes fixed on the alien leaders standing at the edge of the square. One of the leaders, an older alien with scaled skin and piercing yellow eyes, stepped forward. The law is not dead, outsider. It was simply forgotten. But if you demand the trial, you must face the Canyon of Night. The words sent another wave of murmurs through the crowd. The Canyon of Night was no ordinary place. It was a deep scar in the planet's surface, home to creatures that even seasoned hunters feared. Few who entered returned alive. The human didn't flinch. Name the terms. The leader's eyes glinted. Survive until dawn. Return with proof you faced what hunts there. Only then will the girl be yours to protect. The alien girl's father smirked, certain the human would never agree. You'll die before midnight, he said coldly. But the human simply looked at the girl, his expression unreadable. Wait for me. Her breath caught. No one had ever told her to wait for them before, not, and meant it. She nodded, almost without thinking. The crowd was restless now. Some wanted the trial to proceed, eager to see the human fail. Others were curious. This was something different, something they hadn't witnessed in years. The auctioneer, sensing the spectacle could not be stopped, announced the challenge in a booming voice, and the news spread quickly through the city. The preparation they gave him 1 hour to prepare, though he didn't ask for it. The guards escorted him to the edge of the city, where the canyon began. The wind that blew from its depths carried a strange, cold smell like earth, metal, and something faintly rotten. The sound of distant, echoing roars rolled up from the darkness below. The alien girl was not allowed to follow, but she found a spot on the high wall overlooking the canyon's edge. From there, she could just make out his silhouette as he tightened the straps on his boots and checked the blade at his belt. A guard offered him a torch, but he shook his head. Fire will only make me easier to find. The guard laughed. We'll find you anyway, human. Without another word, he stepped over the edge and began his descent into the canyon. The first steps were slow and careful. The walls of the canyon were slick with moss-like growths that pulsed faintly in the dark. The light from the city above quickly faded, swallowed by the blackness below. The human's boots made almost no sound as he moved. His eyes adjusted to the dark, catching faint glimmers of movement ahead. The air was heavy here, pressing against his chest. Somewhere in the distance, something growled, low, deep, and close enough to feel in his bones. He reached the canyon floor and crouched, scanning his surroundings. Strange, twisted trees grew sideways from the rock, their roots gripping the canyon walls like claws. Pools of dark liquid reflected tiny pinpricks of light from bioluminescent insects that swirled in lazy spirals. Then he heard the crunch of something large moving behind him. The first test, he turned slowly, his hand on his blade. A creature emerged from the shadows, its body low and muscular, with too many eyes gleaming in the dark. Its breath steamed in the cold air, and each step made the ground tremble slightly. The human didn't move until it lunged. Then he stepped sideways, faster than the creature expected, and his blade flashed. A shallow cut opened along the beast's flank, and it roared, the sound echoing off the canyon walls. He didn't stay to fight. It was not yet the right moment. Instead, he moved deeper into the canyon, drawing it away from the entrance. Real danger here wasn't one predator, it was that they hunted in packs. Above, the alien girl gripped the walls, railing her knuckles white. She couldn't see much from here, but the distant sound of roars and crashes made her heart race. She didn't know if he would survive, but for the first time in her life, she wanted someone too. The city had not slept. News of the outsider's trial spread like fire through dry grass, and by dawn, the market square was crowded again. This time, no goods were for sale, only curiosity and the hunger to see if the human had returned from the canyon of night. The auction platform still stood in the center, but now the alien girl sat on its edge, guarded by 2 soldiers. Her wrists were no longer chained, though the guard's presence made it clear she was far from free. Her eyes scanned the city gate again and again, but there was no sign of him. Her father stood nearby, wearing a smug smile. You see? Foolish. Human. Dead before the moon even rose. The alien leaders stood together, speaking in low voices. They had bet against him as well after all. No one in living memory had faced the canyon and walked back out. Then, a horn sounded from the outer wall. The noise cut through the crowd's murmurs, freezing them in place. The gates creaked open. The return he walked through. The human's coat was torn. His arms scratched and dirt streaked his face, but he was alive. In his right hand he carried a long blackened fang, as long as a man's forearm. The crowd gasped at the sight. It was proof undeniable that he had faced one of the canyon's apex predators and won. The alien girl's heart leaped. She tried to hide it, but her lips trembled into a small smile. The human dropped the fang onto the auction platform with a dull thud. Proof enough? He asked, his voice low but steady. The leader with the yellow eyes stepped forward, looking down at the fang. His expression tightened. It is enough. By the old law, she is yours to protect. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Some shouted in protest, others cheered. The girl's father stepped forward, his face red with anger. This is an outrage. You cannot. The leader silenced him with a raised hand. The law is clear. Your deal is void. The father turned on the human, his voice shaking. She is our blood. You have no right. The human met his glare without blinking. You gave up that right when you put her in chains. The crowd began to turn restless. Those who supported the human shouted back at those who wanted the auction to stand. The 2 guards beside the girl tightened their grip on their weapons. Her father stepped toward her, as if to pull her away, but the human moved between them. Touch her, he said quietly, and you'll regret it. Her father froze. The crowd went silent again, sensing something about to break. Then, without warning, One of the guards lunged at the human. The clash was fast and brutal. The human sidestepped, caught the guard's wrist. It twisted hard, sending the alien's weapon clattering to the ground. The second guard swung his staff, but the human ducked, driving his shoulder into the guard's chest and sending him stumbling backward. The crowd erupted into chaos. Some ran to get a better view, others to get away from the fight. The girl watched, in shock. This wasn't like the swift strikes in the canyon. This was raw, controlled aggression meant to end the fight quickly. Every movement he made was deliberate, efficient. The standoff within moments. Both guards were on the ground, groaning. The human stepped forward, placing himself fully between the girl and the rest of the square. His eyes swept the crowd. "Anyone else?" he asked. For a long moment, no one moved. Then her father snarled, pulling a hidden blade from his sleeve. "You will not take her," he charged. The girl's breath caught, but the human didn't retreat. He sidestepped at the last second, caught her father's arm, and twisted, forcing the blade from his grip. With one final shove, he sent the man sprawling into the dust. The square went silent except for the sound of her father coughing. The human bent down, picked up the blade, and tossed it aside. "I'm not here to kill anyone," he said, his voice carrying across the square. "But I will protect what is mine." The word mine sent a shiver through the girl, not of fear, but of something else entirely. The alien leaders, seeing the chaos could not be contained, made their ruling official. By the law of claim, the yellow-eyed leader announced, the human now holds full protection rights over the girl. She will leave with him immediately. Father's protests were drowned out by the crowd's noise. Some cheered, others muttered curses. But no one dared challenge the ruling. The human turned to the girl and held out his hand. "Come," she hesitated. Not because she didn't want to go, but because no one had ever spoken to her like that, like she had a choice. Slowly, she placed her hand in his. The two of them walked toward the gate together. The crowd parted reluctantly, murmuring as they passed. Some stared with anger, others with respect. Once outside the square, the noise faded behind them. The girl glanced at him. Why did you do this?" He didn't answer right away. His eyes were on the road ahead, but his grip on her hand was firm, because no one should be sold. Swallowed hard. For the first time, she believed it might be true. Far behind them, in the market square, her father's glare followed their every step. His voice was low and cold as he spoke to one of the remaining guards. "Follow them." Isn't over? Human didn't know yet. But saving her in the square was only the first battle. The road leading out of the city was narrow and silent, lined with crooked stone walls that cast long, jagged shadows under the early morning sun. The alien girl walked beside the human, still clutching the warm cloak he had given her. The dust beneath their feet whispered with each step. She kept glancing back over her shoulder, half expecting to see her father charging after them. But for now, the road was empty. "You don't have to keep looking back," the human said without slowing. His pace, she hesitated before replying. "You don't know my family." He looked at her then, his eyes steady. "I know the kind of people who put chains on someone they claim to care about." She lowered her gaze. "They call it honor. Then they've twisted the word so much. It's meaningless." The weight of the law, they reached a small stone bridge over a dry riverbed. The human stopped and turned to face her. "You understand what the law of claim means, don't you?" She nodded faintly. "It means you own me now." His jaw tightened. "No, it means you're under my protection. No one can take you without challenging me directly. And I'm not losing to anyone." The words were firm but not boastful. Something about the way he said them made her believe him. Still, her voice was small. "Protection lasts as long as you want it to. What if you get tired of me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he adjusted the strap on his shoulder pack and started walking again. "If I was the type to get tired of people, I wouldn't have risked the canyon for you." Shadows in the hills by midday, the city walls were only a distant outline. The road wound through low hills, dotted with strange tall plants that swayed, even without wind. The air here smelled different, cooler. Cleaner, but the girl's unease hadn't faded. The human's sharp gaze kept flicking toward the ridgelines on either side. She noticed it. "You see something?" He nodded slightly. We're being followed. Her heart sank. My father's men, maybe. Or someone else who doesn't like how things turned out this morning. They kept walking, but his pace slowed just enough to listen for movement behind them. A faint crunch of gravel came from the ridge, then another. Whoever was following them wasn't trying too hard to hide. The ambush had happened when they reached a narrow pass between two rock walls. Figures stepped out from the shadows ahead, 4 of them, armored in black leather and carrying curved blades. More movement came from behind as 3 others blocked the way back. The girl froze. 7, she whispered. The leader, a tall alien with ridged skin and a crooked smile, stepped forward. By the order of her blood family, she comes with us. You can walk away, human, and keep your life. The human's expression didn't change. By the law of claim, she's under my protection. Step aside. The leader laughed, a dry, cruel sound. The law means nothing out here. Only strength matters. Then you've made a mistake, the human said quietly. The first attacker rushed in, swinging his blade. The human caught his wrist, twisted hard, and drove his elbow into the alien's chest, sending him stumbling back. The second came from the side, but the human ducked low, sweeping the alien's legs out from under him. The pass erupted into chaos. Blades clashed, boots scraped against stone, and shouts echoed between the walls. The girl pressed herself against the rock, her hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding with every strike. One alien swung high, aiming for the human's head, but he stepped in close, trapping the attacker's arm and slamming his fist into the alien's jaw. The attacker crumpled. The leader lunged with a snarl, his blade catching the sunlight as it slashed forward. The human parried, their blades locking for a brief moment before the human pushed hard, sending the leader stumbling. The turning point, 2 attackers remained. The human shifted his stance, his breath steady despite the fight. Still want to test me? They hesitated, glancing at their fallen companions. Then, without a word, they backed away. The leader, nursing a bruised shoulder, spat on the ground. This isn't over, human. Good, the human replied, because I'm not done protecting her. The attackers retreated into the hills, disappearing into the shadows from which they came. The quiet aftermath, a girl rushed to him. You're hurt. He glanced at a shallow cut along his forearm. Nothing serious. She stared at him, confusion in her voice. Why? Why do you keep risking yourself for me? He met her eyes. It's because I know what it's like to be treated as less than human, or less than alive. Her throat tightened, but no words came. She simply followed him as they resumed walking, the weight of his words staying with her, the unseen thread as they disappeared over the next hill. A lone rider emerged from the rocks above, watching them. His armor bore the crest of her father's. He waited until they were far enough away before turning his mount back toward the city. The girl didn't see him. The human didn't either. But the game had shifted. The law of protection had been tested once, and it would be tested again. For now, the road stretched ahead, open and quiet. But the shadows they had left behind were already moving to meet them again. The sun was already sinking by the time they reached the canyon's rim. It wasn't the same place where the human had faced the trial. This one was deeper, narrower, and far less forgiving. The locals called it the Silent Maw because once the sun dipped below the rocks, the wind stopped, and the air grew unnervingly still. The girl peered down into the shadows. We can't stay here, can we? The human adjusted the strap of his pack. We can't go forward without crossing. Crossing at night will be safer than in the heat of the day. Her eyes widened. Safer? At night? He gave a faint half-smile. Some predators hunt by sight. Darkness evens the odds. Descent, they climbed down the jagged rocks, one slow step at a time. The canyon swallowed the last rays of daylight until the world around them became shapes and outlines. The only light came from faint, bluish fungi clinging to the walls and glowing insects that drifted lazily in the air every few minutes. A small pebble would tumble from somewhere above, echoing far too loudly in the stillness. Always the girl's fingers curled tightly around the rough stone for balance. Stay close, the human said. She nodded, but her eyes kept darting to the shadows. "This place feels wrong." "It's not wrong," he replied. "It's just honest." "Hear everything? Wants to eat you? No pretending otherwise?" The first sound they reached the canyon floor, a narrow stretch of cracked earth dotted with pools of stagnant water. The silence pressed in from every side, then dash click, click, click. The sound was faint, but sharp, like stones tapping together. The girl froze. "What is that?" The human crouched low, scanning the shadows. "Stalker crab," he whispered. "Big one." A dark shape slid along the canyon wall, 6 legs, claws like hooked blades, and eyes that reflected the blue fungi's light. It moved with unsettling patience, circling them as if deciding when to strike. "Don't run," he murmured. "It reacts to sudden movement." The crab moved faster than she thought possible, lunging with its front claws wide. The human shoved her to the side, catching the creature's nearest claw with his blade. Sparks flew as metal scraped against its hardened shell. The girl scrambled backward, her heart hammering. The creature lunged again, forcing the human into a tight sidestep. He slashed across one of its legs, and it let out a high-pitched hiss. Retreating just far enough to reassess its prey, "Stay behind me," he said without looking back. She swallowed hard. "You're bleeding, it's not mine." The turning point, the crab shifted its weight, preparing another charge. This time, the human didn't wait. He lunged first, aiming low, his blade biting into the joint of its other front leg. "Da!" Creature shrieked and stumbled sideways, thrashing violently. He pressed the attack, driving the point of his blade up into the softer gap under its shell. The crab convulsed, then went still, its legs curling inward. The human stepped back, breathing hard. "Let's keep moving before something bigger smells this." The girl nodded quickly, her eyes still wide from the fight. The heart of the canyon hours passed as they moved deeper into the silent maw. The air grew colder, breaths visible in faint white puffs. The walls here seemed to lean inward, blotting out the thin strip of starlight above. They found a narrow ledge halfway up the canyon wall and decided to rest. From here, they could see the canyon floor stretching in both directions. Winding like a serpent into the distance, the girl sat with her knees drawn up under the cloak he had given her. "Do you ever get tired of fighting?" He was quiet for a moment before answering. "Fighting's not the hard part. It's knowing why you're doing it that keeps you moving." She studied him in the dim light. "And why are you doing this?" "For me." His gaze stayed on the darkness below. "'Cause I don't like leaving things broken if I can fix them." Chest tightened at his words. She had been called many things in her life: burden, disappointment, debt, but never something worth fixing. The night visitor's faint sound broke the stillness, a series of low, throaty growls echoing from somewhere far down the canyon. The human's eyes sharpened. "They're moving in packs," he muttered. "What is?" she whispered. Before he could answer, the glow of several pairs of eyes appeared below. Large wolf-like shapes moved silently along the canyon floor. Their fur blending into the shadows, their steps deliberate. They stopped near the dead crab, sniffing the air. The girl's pulse pounded in her ears. "Will they climb up here?" "Not unless they're hungry enough," he said softly. Then, after a pause, "They're hungry enough." The chase, the first wolf leapt, claws scraping the canyon wall as it scrambled upward. The human was already moving, pulling her along the ledge toward a narrow split in the rock. They slipped inside just as the first wolf's jaws snapped. Where her leg had been a heartbeat before, the tunnel was barely wide enough for them to pass through side by side. The sounds of claws on stone followed them, closer and closer. At the far end of the tunnel, they emerged onto another ledge, this one higher and narrower. The wolves hesitated below, pacing. For now, they were safe, but only because the predators were waiting for a mistake. The long hours they spent the rest of the night pressed against the cold rock, listening to the low growls below. The human kept his blade ready, his eyes never fully closing. The girl huddled beside him, sound of his steady breathing the only thing keeping her calm. By the time the first light of dawn touched the canyon walls, the wolves were gone. The human rose stiffly, scanning the shadows one last time before offering her a hand. "Come on," he said. "The night's over. But this isn't the last one we'll have to survive." She took his hand, her fingers lingering just a moment. Longer than necessary. For the first time, she realized she wasn't just following him because he had saved her. She was following him because she trusted him. And in this world, that was more dangerous than any canyon. The first rays of morning light spilled across the canyon walls, turning the jagged rocks gold. The air was crisp and cool, carrying the scent of stone and dust. For most travelers, dawn was a promise of safety after the dangers of the night. But for the human and the alien girl, dawn was only a reminder their enemies had not given up. The wolves had vanished into the shadows hours earlier, but the human knew they weren't gone. Predators like that didn't stop hunting just because. The sun was up. They only waited for another chance. "Stay close," he said. Offering his hand as she stepped down from the ledge, she hesitated. "You always say that, but what if I can't keep up?" His gaze met hers. "Then I'll carry you." The climb out the canyon's walls seemed steeper in daylight. Loose stones slid underfoot, tumbling down into the shadows below. The human went first, testing each hold before letting her follow. His movements were steady, deliberate, but his eyes were constantly scanning above the rim. Halfway up, the girl paused, her breath coming fast. "How much farther?" "Not far," he replied, offering his arm to help her over a narrow ledge. "Once we're up, it's open ground.
Ow!
They can't trap us as easily there." She nodded, though her heart still pounded, not from the climb, but from the way the shadows seemed to shift in the corners of her vision, the waiting party. When they finally reached the canyon rim, the sight that met them made her stop cold. 6 figures stood in a loose half-circle, blocking the path forward. The sunlight glinted off their armor, each piece marked with her family's crest. Her father wasn't among them, but the man in the center wore the same cold, calculating expression. "So," the leader said, his voice smooth, "the hero returns." His gaze flicked to the girl. "And you bring back our runaway prize." "She's not yours," the human said evenly. "By the law of claim, she's under my protection." The leader smiled faintly. "The law is for those who fear the consequences of breaking it. I am not one of them." The first move without warning, 2 of the armored men stepped forward. Drawing curved blades, the human shifted slightly, placing himself fully in front of the girl. "You can walk away now," the leader said, "and no one will hunt you again. Refuse, and you won't leave this ridge alive." The human's eyes narrowed. "You've already made your choice." The first attacker rushed in, blade aimed low. The human sidestepped, catching the man's arm and twisting until the blade fell from his grip. Before the attacker could recover, the human drove a sharp elbow into his chest, sending him sprawling. The second came in fast from the side, but the human blocked the strike with his forearm, then stepped in close and swept the man's legs. Out from under him, the crowd of armored men shifted uneasily. The leader steps in. The leader drew his own weapon, a long spear with a gleaming hooked tip. He twirled it once before lunging forward. The human dodged the first thrust, but the spear's length kept him at a distance. The girl could only watch, her fists clenched. Every time the human moved in to strike, the leader would pull back, forcing him to defend instead of attack. Finally, the human caught the spear shaft with both hands, twisting hard. The leader resisted for a moment, then let go unexpectedly, using the shift in momentum to drive his fist into the human's ribs. The blow staggered him, but he didn't fall. He simply reset his stance, eyes locked on the leader. Breaking the standoff, the leader smirked, circling slowly. "You're strong, human, but strength alone won't." He didn't finish. The human lunged forward suddenly, closing the gap before the leader could react. His hand shot out, grabbing the leader's shoulder and yanking him forward into a hard knee strike. The leader crumpled, gasping for air. The other men shifted forward uncertainly, but the human straightened, his voice sharp. "Do you want to test me next?" No one moved. The escaped the human turned to the girl. "We're leaving." She followed without hesitation. The men parted reluctantly, their eyes full of hate but their weapons lowered. They could have attacked, but none of them wanted to be the one lying broken on the ground next to their leader. walked until the ridge curved, and the group was out of sight. Only then did the girl let out the breath she'd been holding. "You could have killed them," she said quietly. He glanced at her. "That's not my goal. Staying alive and keeping you safe, that's the goal." The quiet before the next storm, they made camp under a low outcropping of rock, where the wind carried the smell of wildflowers instead of dust and blood. The girl sat close to the small fire he built, her hands warmed by its glow. "You keep saying I'm under your protection," she said after a long silence. "But what happens when my father sends more men, or comes himself?" The human stared into the fire. "Then we face him. We make sure he never tries again." Shh. She searched his face for fear, but found none. Instead, she saw something steadier, determination. 4. The first time, she thought maybe it wasn't just about survival anymore. Maybe they could win. Unseen eyes, far away, on a hill overlooking their small fire. A single figure stood watching through a scope. He adjusted the lens, focusing on the girl's face. Then he lowered it, tapped a device on his wrist, and spoke. In a low voice, "I found them. Send word to the master. He'll want to come in person." The fire below crackled quietly, unaware that the next threat was already on its way. The morning broke calm and bright, but the human woke with a heaviness in his chest. It wasn't the cold, nor the fatigue of endless travel. It was the quiet. Quiet like this, after days of pursuit, meant only one thing. Danger was waiting. Ahead, the alien girl stirred from her blanket, blinking against the sunlight. "You didn't sleep," she said softly. "I don't need much," he replied. But his gaze was fixed on the ridge beyond their camp. Something moved there. Just a flicker of light metal catching the sun, the father's arrival by midday, the sound of hooves reached them, a small dust cloud formed in the distance, drawing closer with each minute. When it finally cleared, her father rode at the front. Flanked by 8 armed riders, he dismounted slowly, his boots crunching on the dry grass. His face was calm, almost pleasant, but the tightness around his eyes betrayed his rage. "You've cost me much, human," he said, his voice even. "Money, influence, respect." The human stood with his hands at his sides, though his stance was ready. "You lost those when you sold your daughter." Her father's eyes flicked to her. "You think he's saving you?" "No, child. He's only keeping you until you're of use to him." She stepped forward, surprising them both. "You sold me for a title. He's given me a life." Her father's smile vanished. "Then you've chosen your side." The first strike had happened fast. 2 riders moved in, swords flashing. The human met the first with a sharp block, twisting the blade away and driving his fist into the attacker's jaw. The second came from behind, but the girl shouted a warning, giving him time to spin and parry. The clash rang out across the plain, steel against steel. The thud of boots against the ground, the sharp grunts of effort. The human fought with precision, each movement efficient, wasting no energy. But the numbers were against him. Her father didn't join the fight. He simply watched, waiting for the moment when his men would bring the human to his knees. The turning point, one rider lunged for the girl, trying to grab her. She stepped back instinctively, but her heel caught on a rock and she stumbled. Rider's hand closed around her arm only for the human to appear in an instant, ripping the man away with such force that he crashed to the ground. "Stay behind me," he barked. She nodded, retreating, but her eyes were wide-not with fear. But with a growing realization, he wasn't fighting just to win. He was fighting like someone who had decided there was no other outcome but her safety. The father joins. And her father finally drew his weapon, a long, double-edged blade polished to a shine. He stepped forward, his movements slow and deliberate. Enough games. The human squared off against him, the air between them heavy with unspoken challenge. The first clash was brutal, the sound of their blades striking, echoing across the open land. Her father was faster than his age suggested, but the human strength met him blow for blow. Dust swirled around them as they circled, each searching for an opening. Finally, her father fainted low, then drove his blade toward the human's chest. But the human twisted aside, catching the strike on his own blade and forcing their weapons down into the dirt. You can stop this, the human said through clenched teeth. Her father's eyes blazed. Not until she's mine again. The final moment, the fight surged into a blur of motion. The human pressed forward, forcing her father back step by step. A sharp kick to the knee made the older man stumble, and in that instant, the human wrenched the blade from his hands, sending it spinning into the grass. Her father froze, breathing hard. The human stood over him, blade in hand, every muscle tense. The girl stepped closer, her voice trembling but firm. Let him live. The human's gaze softened slightly, but he didn't lower his weapon. If you come after her again, he said to her father, I won't give you the choice next time. Her father glared, but the look in the human's eyes told him the threat was real. Slowly, he signaled to his men.
Out.
They mounted their horses in silence and rode away the dust. Swallowing them from sight, the road ahead, the girl exhaled, her shoulders sagging as the tension left her. It's over, she whispered. For now, the human said, sliding his blade back into its sheath. But men like him don't forget. She moved closer, the wind catching her hair. Then I'll just have to stay where he can't reach. Me. He gave her a small, rare smile. That's the plan. A new path, they walked together across the open plain, the horizon stretching endlessly before them. For the first time, she didn't feel like she was running from something. She was walking toward something new. The human didn't promise her safety forever. He didn't promise her a life without danger, but he'd given her something, her family never had dash choice. As the sun dipped lower, painting the sky in gold and crimson, she realized this was more than survival. This was freedom, and as long as he walked beside her, she would never give it up again.